Welcome to Mr. Chalk's Revision Tips. In this video, we will look at adaptation in animals and in plants. So every organism has certain features or characteristics that allow it to live successfully in its habitat. So these features are called adaptations. So plant adaptations can be structural, behavioural or physiological. So regardless of the type, all adaptations make the organism better suited to their environment and provide them with a better chance of survival and therefore reproduction. So the adaptations that arrive from competition are essential for the process of evolution. So survival of the fittest means that those that are best adapted to survive. Plant adaptations can also be structural, behavioural or physiological. So structural adaptations of plants are physical features which allow them to compete. So an example is the formations of spines or spikes that stop them from being eaten. Behavioural adaptations. So behavioural adaptations of plants are behaviours which give them some sort of advantage. So all plant shoots grow up quickly towards the light, which enable them to maximise photosynthesis. Physiological adaptations in plants is where you've got a plant that is making some sort of poison or toxin which is going to stop them from being eaten. Cacti have a number of anatomical and behavioural adaptations for absorbing and storing water, as well as preventing water loss and protecting themselves from predators. So they've got reduced leaves, so reducing the total number or the size of leaves will reduce the surface area where water will be lost from. They've got rolled leaves, so rolling leaves reduces the exposure of the stomata to the dry hair around it, so therefore reduces evaporation. It's got a thick waxy cuticle, so having leaves covered by a thickened cuticle prevents water loss from the leaves. The stomatas are in pits, so having stomatas in pits surrounded by hair helps trap water, hence reduces transpiration. And they grow quite slowly, so low-growing plants are less likely to be exposed to wind and more likely to be shaded, so therefore that reduces water loss. So the drawing shows a plant that is adapted to life in a hot, dry desert. Just two ways in which it's adapted. So it can swell up, so it can store water in dry periods. It's got reduced leaves, or it's got spines to cause water to condensate on them. And if we're talking about cactuses having some idea about long roots near to the ground, so the capture of the water when it rains is also something that you might want to mention. So two types of seaweed that live in a similar seashore. So most of the time these two seaweeds are covered in water. Bladderwrack has bladders filled with air. The bladderwrack grows more quickly than sawwrack. Might suggest an explanation for this. So some of the key things that you need to talk about is that the bladders help them float on water, so therefore they get more light, so it can photosynthesize more, and if they photosynthesize more, they'll be able to go and convert the glucose they're making into things needed to grow. Structural adaptations of animals. So structural adaptations of animals are physical features which allow them to compete. So animals have a wide range of structural adaptations, including sharp claws to help them catch prey. They can dig burrows, scratch trees, and signal out territories. Behavioural adaptations of animals are behaviours which give them an advantage. So behavioural adaptation might include some sort of mating ritual. Physiological adaptations of animals are processes which allow them to compete. So the production of venom in some types of spiders and in some types of snakes would be a good example of this. A example of a organism which is adapted to live underwater and hunt is a shark. So a shark has some general adaptations which allow it to live underwater. So for instance, it's streamlined and it's got gills, but it's also got some specific adaptations which make it good for hunting things. So its streamlined shape reduces water friction when moving through water. Its gills have a large surface area so they can extract oxygen from the water. Its fins are relatively powerful so it can move quickly. And it's got lots of specialised organs so it can detect sound movement and electrical fields that other organisms are giving off. It's highly sensitive smell so it can detect even a small drop of blood from miles away. It's got lots of sharp teeth that can be constantly replaced. Silver in colour underneath, so if a fish looks up, that acts as camouflage because it just looks like the surface of the water. So anglerfish live at depths of over 1,000 metres. So many anglerfish have a transparent lure containing a high concentration of bioluminescent bacteria. So bioluminescent bacteria produce light, so suggests an advantage of the anglerfish having a lure. So some of the things that you might want to talk about is it lets the fish see where it's going, it attracts prey to it, or it might attract mates to it. If it's attracting prey towards it, then the anglerfish will be more likely to get food. If it's attracting mates towards it, then the anglerfish will be more likely to reproduce. A camel has many adaptations which allow it to live in dry, hot conditions. So it's got large flat feet so it doesn't sink into the sand. It's got thick fur on top so that it shades the body, and thin fur elsewhere which enables heat to be lost. It's got a large surface area to volume ratio to maximise heat loss, and it's got the ability to go for a long time without water. Right? Remember that it's not storing water in the humps though, it stores fat in the humps that can be converted back into water. They also don't sweat and their urine contains very little water. They've got the ability to tolerate temperatures up to 42 degrees. They've got slit-like nostrils and eyelashes to stop them breathing in sand. So one adaptation of a type of camel is its temperature tolerance. So this means that the animal's body temperature can rise up to 6 degrees before it starts to sweat. So explain how temperature tolerance can help it to survive in the desert. Some of the key things that you need to be talking about is it sweats less so it loses less water because there is little water available in the desert. So how does fat store help the animal survive? It's because it can be metabolized back into water. How does producing little urine and very dry feces help? Is so water is not lost in that feces and urine. And how does having a hard mouth help? It means that it doesn't get damaged by spines on plants and such forth that it's trying to eat. Inhabiting cold areas is equally as difficult as inhabiting hotter areas. So a good example of this would be a polar bear. So they're white in appearance to act as camouflage from the prey. They've got a thick layer of fat and fur which helps insulate against cold. They've got a small surface area to volume ratio to minimise heat loss. And they've got a greasy coat so if they go into the water runs off it really quickly. So the table compares some features of a polar bear with another bear that lives in the sun. So the polar bear lives in the Arctic where the climate's cold. The other bear lives in tropical forest. So use the information from the table to explain how the polar bear is adapted to Arctic conditions. So the key things that you need to talk about are the fact that it's got white fur, which is going to act as camouflage. It's got thicker fur to help. Extremophiles are organisms that live in very extreme conditions. So these could be high temperatures, high salts or concentrations in water, or high pressure. So some microorganisms live in very hot rocks and water. So for instance, next to volcanic vents. Some bacteria can live in water containing very high salt concentrations. Extremophile bacteria live in hot water, have enzymes whose optimum temperature is much higher than normal. So the high temperatures encountered by them do not denature these enzymes.
Thanks for watching.